Hello and welcome back to the Foundation series, where we've been going through the first, through the first 10 chapters of Genesis. We're still in the first 10 verses, or at least not today. We're getting beyond that today. But today what we're going to be looking at is the doctrine surrounding creation, but more looking at the sun and the moon. So we've already looked at light versus darkness, but recognized that previous to this, when God was talking about light versus darkness, it was His glory, His light that was shining through, and darkness as that representation of the fact that there is no presence of light. Like I said, that they don't create a darkness meter, they have a light meter in science where it just measures how much or how little light is present. Well, today we're actually going to look at now the physical light. And it says here in Genesis that there was a sun and a moon. Now, I'm just going to continue to re-emphasize this. Number one, if you have not watched the previous Foundations videos, go back and watch them because each will build upon another. But secondarily to that, I am emphasizing a literal, physical 6 days of creation, but beyond that, a creation, a God created, not an evolutionary, these things exploded and transformed over millennia, but that God spoke and it happened. And it is so crucial to us as Christians that we believe fully that what God said happened. That God is not a man that He should lie, but He speaks and it happens. And that's a God that is actually worth believing in, is one that is so powerful that He can just speak and things happen. And so we read here, picking up in Genesis chapter 1, in verse 14, it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the firmament." So now this is not let there be light, but rather let there be lights in the firmament, the heavens, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And I want to just touch on that there over a period of time has become a confusion. There's become a confusion surrounding astrology, astronomy, and Christianity. And some people see that there is nothing wrong with any of the three, that they can all just go perfectly together. And what happens is that Satan takes a small amount of reality, a small amount of truth, and then he mixes it with a little bit of falsehood, a little bit of Wicca, a little bit of witchcraft, a little bit of something else, and he perverts the truth. Now, to say that these are a sign and for seasons does signify that God uses the sun and the moon not only for a calendar. And it is interesting to note that whilst we talk about our Gregorian calendar, most people don't know they just call it the calendar. You say, what day is it today? Most people in your circle of influence or reference are going to say that it's probably, Thursday, or it's the 5th of January, or whatever day it happens to be in this year. Well, that's the Gregorian calendar. Of course, if you go over to China, they're going to give you a different date because they don't work on the Gregorian, they work on the Chinese. But of course, then if you go to other cultures or religions, they're going to have their own one. It's interesting that most calendars will rely on either the sun or the moon. Now, it's interesting here, God says, let there be lights and let them be for signs, seasons, days, and years. And the Hebrew calendar actually uses both the sun and the moon to actually determine what day it is, what date it is, what time in that cycle it is, and how long the year goes for. So it is the only calendar that is actually set to the sun and the moon. It is a lunar and solar calendar built into one. But what I want to touch on right now is also this signs. The fact that he does say signs. Now, it's interesting that it is believed that there was the star signs that we would know as the Aries and the Pisces, and that actually had their roots in Christianity. Now, you've got the 12 tribes of Jacob, and Joseph has his dream where he says he saw the stars, and then they bowed down and worshipped the other star, and then the sun and the moon. And Jacob then got upset with Joseph and said that the sun was the father, the moon was the mother, the stars were the brethren. And it has actually been found in ancient ruins, in diggings, that there were these star sign inscriptions, and it's believed that these actually had different names to what we call them now, and they were actually the 12 tribes of Israel. And of course, like I said, Satan gets a little bit of truth and then he mixes it. Now, these stars were not to pick what your future's going to be in an astrology style way, but rather they were more an astronomy style way where they would give navigation, they would give clues to what season that we were currently in. Now I want to go over to what Jesus specifically said about this. And if we look over in Matthew chapter 16, he is speaking to the Jewish people here. And so he's not condemning them for the fact that, he's not condemning them for the fact that they know signs in the sky, but rather that they're not determining or discerning of the signs of the time. And that's interesting. If we look in verse 3, or actually in verse 1 of chapter 16 of Matthew, it says, "The Pharisees also with the Sadducees came, and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. And he answered and said unto them, When it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O you hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times." Now, here he's saying that there is actual physical patterns. When you see the sky red, or when you see the moon on this angle, they would believe that that angle there, it was filling up with water. When it goes on that angle, it's tipping it out. They could tell whether it was going to be raining or whether it was not, whether it was going to be fair weather or not, just based on what the sky looks like. And this is exactly what God meant. It's not a today you're going to walk past 3 cats and then one of them's going to scratch you because I saw this in the signs of the thing, but rather today it's going to be raining. Today it's going to be this. Today we're in for a hot day or drought or what have you, based on what we see as signs and times. And beyond that, we even get different things like eclipses. And as astronomers over the years have charted these eclipses, these lunar and solar ones, they also recognize that it depicts certain times. And this is what Jesus was referring to, that you cannot discern the sign of the times. Interestingly to note that the Magi that came said, "Where is this King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east." Okay, so there is stars that would determine a sign, and it's just to depict what is going to happen. And again, Jesus brings this out in what's known as his Olivet Discourse. If we were to look in chapter 24 of Matthew, it says that in the end of this, where he's talking about the tribulation of those days, and he says in verse 29, "Immediately after the tribulation of the days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. The stars will fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." But rather, if we look at Luke's account over in chapter 21, and when we look in verse 21 and verse 25 of chapter 21, it says, "And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity." So I want you to recognize here that when people talk about signs and seasons, that the sun and the moon were actually given for both a physical season to determine whether it's winter or whether it's summer. We talk about Easter and we say that it comes, or spring or autumn comes at the same time, it be the 1st of April or whatever it is, but yet the Hebrews actually tie it to the equinox because that is when it actually happens. The sun and the moon are given for seasons, not the calendar. And secondarily to that, the sun and the moon were also given for signs, for us to be able to understand and see that here are the signs, the prophetic signs, that when these blood moons happen, it signifies the coming of the end, or it signifies these things. So I want to encourage you to study a little bit deeper, that as we look at the foundations of why did God create the sun and the moon, he could have simply left it that his light, his glory shined, and it was that created light, like it is going to be in the millennial kingdom, which we'll look at later on. But yet he actually gave the sun and the moon for 2 very good reasons. It was not just so that we could see, because we could already see based on his light. It was so that we could have signs and seasons. So maybe you haven't thought about that before, but it's something to challenge your thinking, that the sun is not there so that you can see during the daytime. The sun is there to actually give you signs and seasons, help you know what hour of the day it is based on where it is in the sky, like with a sundial and various different things. So I encourage you to tune in with us tomorrow. If you haven't yet clicked that button, go ahead and subscribe. We're going to be looking now at the next position as to what came after that, and that is the animal kingdom and where it stands in the structure and the authority realm of human dominance. And so we're going to be really looking into that. There might be a few things there that challenge you, but hopefully this has opened up your eyes and challenged you to some questions as to why does the sun and the moon actually exist. So God bless, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.